And welcome everyone to today's topic, developing oral ability, not just for our students, but also for ourselves. When I first started working on my oral ability, I was already a teacher and, or consciously working on it, I should say. So I think there's always this opportunity for us, and particularly we can double up and secretly work on our oral ability while we're teaching our students. My throat is a bit scratchy, so I apologize. And the other very exciting thing is my PowerPoint presentation today. I used one of PowerPoint's automatic templates, which was not for music, but they had a quote in the middle of it, which actually fitted quite well into the topic accidentally. So I'm prepared to be very excited about the quote that's coming. So I will share screen. And, oh, I can just share PowerPoint. That's clever. Okay, and this should work if I make it. And here we go. Okay, so today's topic. So to start off with, I thought, let's look at some things that have been said about oral. I'm just going to move everyone's faces off my screen. There we go. And I'll move that one off. Oh, that's so good. Okay. So this particular quote comes from a book called Aural and the University Music Undergraduate. So it's not referring to young students, but it says aural involves the processing of sound in the inner ear, and that underpins a range of activities undertaken by musicians. This includes composing, performing, improvisation, sight reading, and analysing notated scores. Now, this particular quote comes from Joseph Levine. He wrote a book, I think it was in the late 1800s. It was a very long time ago. And his book is called Basic Principles in Pianoforte Playing. It can be, there's a free copy of it online as PDFs, or it is printed as well. But he says a student who hears fine rhythms upon the various mechanical sound reproducing machines has distinct advantages. And he also says of students, most students hear, but they do not listen. The finest students are those who have learned to listen. The people who cannot identify chords, such as common chords and seventh chords by ear, stands about as much chance of entering the higher realms of music as a student who does not understand a word of Latin does of comprehending a page from the Virgil. Very sorry for that very old-fashioned sentence, but I think he's hit the nail on the head. You know, somebody who doesn't speak Latin has no chance of reading Latin. Somebody who cannot hear the common chords by ear really will struggle to reach the higher realms of music. I just realized I wasn't doing the PowerPointy thing. Oh, yes, now I am. Okay, so what are the benefits of developing oral ability? Well, developing oral ability aids us in learning to read music. It improves our sense of pulse, it improves our intonation, it improves our musicality overall, and it enables things like transcription and improvisation and composition. So why is oral so important? Well, both active and passive listening play a role in oral development. And active listening is obviously where we sit down and we're consciously listening to music. Maybe we're following along on the score, maybe we're thinking about the analysis, whereas passive listening is what we actually do all the time when we're walking down the street and we hear music playing over the speaker system, or if we've got music while we drive, any music that's just in our background. So all of these play a role in our oral development. And this applies to language, of course, as well. But as we hear a language in our background as we're growing up, we're actually absorbing it. Now, study and practice at oral is essential to enable us to use the skill for creative purposes. If we haven't practiced using oral, then it doesn't free us to use it in a creative way or to create and activate that skill in our creation. Oral ability and the associated skills lie at the heart. So this is a quote again from that particular research, the book was on the research. Oral ability and its associated skills lie at the heart of musical practice at every level, and without their perseverance from the early stages to a level of proficiency, the pursuit of music to the point of expertise would not be possible. And the thing that struck to me about this sentence was from early stages. I know as a student, I think the first time oral even came up was when we were preparing for an exam. But this is from the early stages and persevering at it so that there is a level of proficiency with oral. And this particular study by Wright found that there was a positive relationship between a good oral ability and final grades in university level music studies. So what that means, for those who don't understand it, it's just a statistical comment. And it means that as oral ability is good, as oral ability goes up, grades or marks go up as well. Not necessarily grades in oral, but just in music generally. For certain musical activities like jazz and improvisation, the importance of the inner ear is absolutely paramount. I'm not a jazz player, so when I make comments about jazz, they're from quotes. Now, I want to just make a really important reminder. When we teach oral, we must have a bigger picture than teaching to passing the exam. We don't teach students for exams. We are here to train musicians. Exam passes, you can pass grade 8 and still have no musical skills. So what we want is, yes, sure, if we teach oral, then they are going to do better in their exams for the oral section. But that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to train musicians. So here is the quote that just happened to be in the middle of this document. I thought, you know what, this is perfect. Walt Disney says, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So how can we begin doing oral? Well, right from lesson 1, oral can be developed by listening to recordings of pieces they are learning, passively or actively or both. Singing from the first lessons, that might include things like finger number songs. So we're teaching them finger numbers, but we're also teaching them some oral skills by singing that. Or the pieces that they're playing, we can convert them into songs that they can sing along to. We can sing scales, we can sing patterns. And when I say that, we could sing C, I don't know, C, sing La, C chord, Mr. Perfect Pitch is sitting beside me. And so by singing it, not only are we teaching them the pattern, but they're internalizing what a C chord sounds like. Imitating rhythms can begin from the first lesson. Composing rhythms can begin at the first lesson. Clapping the beat or the pulse, and learning simple dance steps, or even just walking to the beats, that idea of that gross motor movement that moves with the music. I just want to pause to just talk about listening to the CD, that listening to recordings from day one. This is one of those tenets of Suzuki Method. And when they're listening to the recording, they're hearing the music at the same pitch every day. And so they're developing this sense of exactly knowing what pitch a song starts on. They're hearing the music, they're memorizing the music. They've actually memorized it orally before they play it at the piano. This way they're familiar with it. And things that the students are familiar with, they're more likely to enjoy and they're more likely to want to do, rather than some piece that's randomly thrown at them that they've never heard before. They don't already have a relationship with it. But with this idea of listening to CD, developing that relationship. But they're not only memorizing the music, as they're hearing it over and over again, what their brain is doing is memorizing the patterns. And listening to the same CD repeatedly is very different to listening to classical music randomly and having it in the environment. Not to say that's bad, but when we're listening to classical music and not a specific repeated recording, we're not actually memorizing it. And so it doesn't have the same set of benefits. Now, ideally, as I've just said, before the student learns to play a piece, they've already memorized it orally. Now, this allows the brain to make neural connections between what they've heard orally and what is on their instrument. And one thing about oral development is the eye is actually the dominant sense. So if we engage mainly the eye, or as soon as we start engaging the eye, the ear sort of shuts off a little bit and becomes harder to engage. So the more we can try and hook into that oral awareness early, and try and keeping it as dominant as possible so that the eye doesn't supplant it. So, and with Suzuki Method, students are encouraged to try and figure out parts of their songs. Some things they will learn by copying, and some things they learn by figuring it out. And it's a slow and calculated process where the teacher's guiding, but asking them questions that they're trying to solve. But with time, they start being able to find the notes as second nature. And they just hear it. Oh yeah, I know how to play that because I've heard it. I know what those notes are. I know what those intervals are, just from having heard it. So, and this strong oral ability helps them when they're learning to read music. If they've already heard the song and they start reading the notes when they're just a beginner reader and they read the wrong note, they actually know they've read the wrong note because they know that it sounds wrong, and actually helps them to self-correct in the early stages of note reading. You are not watching. He's supposed to be letting people in. Sorry, people who were delayed coming in. Now, so in the lesson, we can either, so this is just some practical thoughts about how we can include oral in the lesson. Now, we can either use the pieces that they're working on, or we can use others. That's a personal preference there. But students can be asked, using whichever set of pieces, clap the pulse to the piece. What about conduct the piece? Teaching conducting is so useful for visualizing time signatures and visualizing beat divisions. You can jump on the first beat of the bar and clap on the others, jump, clap, clap, clap for 4/4 time, for instance. And the teacher could be playing something and exaggerating that first beat of the bar, because that's the most important beat, and that's the one they have to jump on. And that helps with the gross motor part of the learning. Singing the songs, singing the intervals, and by that I mean singing second, third, fourth, fifth. So in the song, they're getting the sense of the interval distance. Other things they can do, have I gone to the next slide yet? No. Singing chromatics. I shall sing my semitones each day before I'm perfect. So they can learn their semitones by singing that. They can have the teacher sing one note or play a note and say, find that note on your instrument. It's only one note, so it's not like figuring out a whole piece. But can you find this note on your instrument? And once it's found, we can name it and identify it. We can sing a short melody or a pattern and ask the student to find that pattern on the instrument. It'd be 2 notes. We start with 1 note, go to 2 notes. Another thing that is very helpful for developing perfect pitch is to sing the note names at their pitch. Sing C for me. La, C, D, E. And so having them sing the note, even as they're learning to read the notes on the staff, after they've read the note, then singing it by its name. This gives that memory of the pitch level. As you can see, I haven't developed it. It's something that the research says needs to be developed under the age of 7. But if they're singing those pitches, they internalize that. And it's quite a useful skill. We can regularly provide music and challenge them to learn by ear. So you can balance and say, okay, so we're learning these pieces by note reading, we're learning these pieces by ear. And if you set the task easy, like 2 grades below their current level, that makes it an accessible task to them, and they can go home and figure it out and come back. Other things we can do is ask them to harmonize a melody they already know. And again, using scaffolding them by saying, okay, just let's pick this 3-chord pop song. Probably every single pop song falls under the 3-chord model. But, here, let's see, you play this right hand. Now, what chords do you think we could put there? And they can experiment, particularly if you've only told them it's only 3 chords to choose from. That can open that door to starting to hear what harmonies. For rhythms, we can clap rhythms of pieces we are learning. We can use flashcards, obviously are very popular, and you can create rhythms from flashcards. You can create rhythms on the board. You can create rhythms using dice. You can encourage them to create their own rhythmic patterns to clap. You can play echo games with friends where patterns need to be passed from one person to the other, and you can't, like, you can put a beat for 4/4, and this person makes up a 4-beat pattern, and this person makes up a 4-beat around a circle, and the pattern, the creation can't be dropped. You can use rhythm words to support the sense of note duration, as with Kodai has words and so forth. And like for me, caterpillar is semiquavers. So caterpillar, they can know that word, they get that sense of what the duration is. When a student is struggling with rhythm, and it's not in my slides exactly, but I will get to the point about if they're struggling with pitch, which was brought up on the forum. But if a student is struggling, it's often that they can't feel the sensation. And so the parent or teacher can tap the pattern on the student's shoulder so that they can feel it. And this often needs to happen many times. When a student doesn't have a sense of pulse yet, just feeling it many times can be helpful. And you know, we know from generations gone past that rhythm was taught by lots of beating the rhythm on the student. And we can, within child safety laws of our countries, do that. And whether that is that we hit the chair that they're sitting on so at least the vibration goes through their body, or get the parent to do it. But feeling the rhythm, if they can't make the rhythm themselves, they might not be able to feel it. So if we let them feel it by touching, giving them the rhythm, then that can really sort that out for them. Now, identifying intervals, I just mentioned about singing. Same thing and I personally remember for grade 7, my teacher, we did oral at the end of the lesson, and I was never given any methods for how to do it. I was just told, oh, now we're going to do oral. You're wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. And I was sort of guessing and didn't know. When I did grade 7 on my second instrument, I went, you know what, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work. And identifying major and minor intervals was problematic. So that's minor, second, major, second, minor, third, major, third. I apologize, my singing voice is not my strength, but that idea of singing the intervals, they start internalizing. As we sing them by their name, we're internalizing their name and their distance. We can also use the method of finding familiar songs that start with the same interval. An octave is the beginning of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. A fourth is the beginning of We Wish You a Merry Christmas. And a fifth is the beginning of Twinkle, Twinkle. So sometimes when they're asked to identify intervals in the exam, some students do find the beginnings of songs is a very helpful way to find the distance. I feel personally that the first method I've suggested is the best, because you're actually teaching them, these are the intervals, these are their names, without the extra step. But as a student, I found the second one, when I was at school, that was the only way I could do it, because my piano teacher hadn't given me any methods. Now, when they have developed perfect pitch, that makes things so much easier, right? They can hear this is a C, they can hear this is a G, and so all they need to do is go C, D, E, F, G. Oh, it's a fifth. So, I skipped. So what about the questions about identifying chords and progressions? And I find this is one of the most scary parts when it appears up in an exam. But, you know, if we've done the first things, if we've given them the find a melody, make up chords that match. If we've been exploring chords, then when we come to something like this, it becomes much easier. So always try and find the bass note. And if learning figure-based notation, this is where the grade 6 theory really becomes beneficial in oral, because if you know figure-based notation, you can start to hear the intervals, and then you recognize the chords inversion by its interval shape. So that's just a side plug for grade 6 theory there. As teachers, we can demonstrate examples of 2 chord progressions to become familiar with the sound. So that could be starting from the principal cadences, but then just extending to other. This is what 1 goes to 1B sounds like. Here's another example of 1 goes to 1B. Here's another example of 1 goes to 1B. So the student's going, oh yeah, I can recognize the sound 1 goes to 1B, both when the bass goes up and when the bass goes down, because I've heard that progression. Okay, so now 6 to 4 sound like, and so forth. So just in groups of 2, and then it can be extended. From my memory, for grade 8 ABRSM, you have to do a 4 chord progression, I believe, and there's only a limited number of chords to choose from. So this exercise can be very good in preparing for that. Of course, if they've already developed perfect pitch, then they need to identify the bass note, but they have to be careful because they have to make sure they don't just identify the bass note and go, oh, E's on the bottom, so it's E minor. They've got to actually make sure they remember to identify all the notes so they can use their figured bass knowledge again to identify what the inversion is and what the chord is. So what if a student can't sing in tune? And I guess I'll digress for a second to say that there are cultures where the word tone deaf doesn't exist. And that tells us that tone deafness is a feature of our culture. It is not something that is genetic. And so why do we have tone deafness in our cultures where other cultures don't have that word? My theory is to do with the fact that we play loud music where when people sing, they can't actually hear themselves sing, so they get used to not pitching themselves. And of course, you could sort of say that singing out of tune is hereditary. If the mother sings to the child out of tune, or it's environmental hereditary rather than hereditary. So if the mother sings out of tune, then the child is hearing an example of what out of tune singing sounds like, and that is what they're going to imitate. So this is where when a student comes to me and it's clear the mother can't sing in tune, I listen to the CD more. You know, I'm not teaching the mother to sing in tune, I'm teaching the child, but put the CD on more so that the example that you are hearing all the time is the in tune model rather than the out of tune mother. I don't tell the mothers not to sing. I think they should definitely sing. That's great. But let's make sure we've got an in tune example so that the child doesn't repeat what the mother is doing. Now, oh yes, a chromatic tuner can be useful. And just trying to sing mini glisses and showing the student how to sing mini glisses and watch the chromatic tuner move. And that can give an idea, well, how do we lift our pitch? How do we lower our pitch? And then playing, just my app that I use for that is called Clear Tune. And so if anybody was going, I really wanted a chromatic tuner, but I didn't know where to start, there is an iPhone app. Now, have the student play C major or another appropriate scale on their instrument, playing one note at a time and singing it back and trying to match it. It might take a while, but if they're doing it every day, they're going to start hearing more of what they're doing. And then when singing along to music, make sure the volume is low enough that you can hear the quality of your voice. My children have been going to a youth group at one of those churches that plays loud music. One thing I started to notice, particularly with my oldest, is he started forcing his voice, and it was getting a horrible tone quality to it. And eventually I realized it was because he wants to sing, but the music's so loud he can't hear himself, so he's pushing his voice, and then he was actually affecting the intonation. So here, back to the fact I just really liked this picture, so I had to include it, even though it's not related at all. So we can make a decision as teachers. Are we going to teach aural as a separate component in the lesson, or are we going to incorporate it into how new pieces are taught? I'm not giving an answer. I'm just asking. That's a personal. My teacher as a child always had aural at the end. To me, it was always unrelated, but she didn't give me skills to solve aural, so it was always a very negative experience. But whether or not, however we teach aural as a component, we should consider that everything we teach, we want to link. Paul Harris talks in his books, I think it's called Simultaneous Learning, but he talks about simultaneous learning, this idea that we want to try and link everything together. So here we're teaching this piece, but how can we add some aural teaching? How can we link that to what we're learning in aural and theory? So always aim to include aural development in every lesson, either very obviously, but this is the aural section of the lesson, or less obviously, like, oh, we're going to figure out a little bit of the next piece. Here's the next note. Can you find it? So here's something just to ponder. Can a person be a musician without being able to read music? Or the corollary that is, can a person be a musician without having well-developed oral skills? And my personal thought is that oral skills are essential, and note reading is highly beneficial. Not that note reading is not important, but there are many musicians out there who are professional musicians who can't read, but they can improvise really well. So if I wanted my student to leave me and all they could do was read music well, but they can't really play, they're not going to get very far with making music for the rest of their life. But if they can play music really well because they've got highly developed oral skills, usually they can keep playing. But you don't have to agree with me on that. It's just something to ponder. Now, so what things can we use to help with oral development in our classroom? And I just pulled some. I mean, there's heaps of great resources out there, but these are some that I use. One is How to Blitz Sight Singing by Samantha Coates. Sight singing and oral development are very highly correlated. And as we know, in the ABRSM exam, in the higher grades, they actually ask us to sight sing. So Samantha Coates' books are known for their joviality, and so that's one of the resources I like to use. And this one, the Contemporary Oral Course by Margaret Brandman, it has a CD and it's like a workbook. But to me, that was the book that fixed and gave me confidence in oral. And as in the theory component of oral is writing down things that you hear, writing down rhythms. She just built it up step by step. And so, yeah, I can highly recommend this book. Paul Harris obviously wrote the books Improve Your Oral, which follows the ABRSM syllabus and gives practical strategies for handling the exam part of the oral development. But as I've pointed out, as I love his books and I use his books, but just remember, we're not teaching oral to pass an exam. So usually I would give students those books later on, closer to the exam. Hey, look, let's link the oral we've been practicing to what's needed in the exam, and let's use his books for that. Anne Warburton wrote a book called Graded Oral Tests. I'm not sure if you can still buy it new, but you can still buy it secondhand. And that was just similar. There were exam style questions to work through. She gives some practical advice about how you can approach them. And then ABRSM practice, oh dear, I spelt it wrong, typo. But oral training in practice is very good for that as well, whether or not you're doing the exams or not, because they give, again, practical ways. This is how you can approach this particular question. This is ways. And so it gives, if you're not quite sure how to teach a student to handle a section of the exam, that book really does break it down. Amy B has a similar book, and when we're practicing for exams, particularly, I'm using a mixture of all of those to give the kids as much practice as possible. Oral doesn't need to be difficult and doesn't need to be scary. And I think a combination of sometimes we're so busy learning the material for the exams that we throw oral in at the end, and then it becomes very anxiety. It's not just a natural part of the learning. And, you know, so that's why just trying to work out songs by ear, whether it's a pop song, whether it's classical music or art music or whatever, just trying to work out songs by ear actually sorts out a whole heap of stuff, a whole heap of neural connections. And because they're doing it themselves, right, anything they do themselves, they're embedding as a stronger learning tool, device. So this is actually the end of my slideshow, and I can't actually see what the time is. But I just wanted to just say it again, in case I haven't said it enough times. Teaching students to do oral is so much bigger than preparing them for 5 minutes in the exam room. It is an essential skill to being a well-rounded musician. And oral makes the written symbols on the page make sense. It opens the door to improvisation and composition and other sorts of creativity, as well as just opens the door to understanding music that they hear. we'd be listening to the radio when my kids were younger, and to ABC Classic FM, and the kids would be going, oh, that piece is in D minor, or did you hear that modulate to this, or did you hear that instrument? And so what they were hearing, they understood. And, it's such a great gift, isn't it, to teach our students to understand music. If they stay with us for only a year or two and they never really reach heights of performance, but what they've gained is this understanding of music, so they can hear music and appreciate it and hear things about it, we've succeeded in benefiting them as a person. I will stop sharing now, and fingers crossed this will do what I want it to do. So I'm here. So does anyone have any questions they either want to ask over the live stream, or any thoughts they want to add to the discussion, or if you want, you can add something to the chat. I should have invited anybody to say what they wanted earlier, but if I don't think you can unmute, let me make it so people can unmute themselves if they want to say something. And does anybody have anything they want to add, or any amazing aural tips they have for teaching aural, or a question?
Okay, can I shoot with a question? Just so what would like a basic startup exercise be for a complete beginner that never sang and it doesn't have that ability to control their voice at all? The first thing when they come and we start and I play a note, one note, and they have to repeat it, and then it starts. They try, it's always the same. So what a suggestion? Is there a suggestion of that situation?
Well, I looked that up when I was preparing, and where I looked up vocal resources. What do singing teachers do when the student can't sing in tune? And they basically said the same thing, was play a note, get them to sing it back, and maybe try and help them go up and down, but don't stress about it, just keep doing it and do it every day. Just play C, sing C, play D, sing D, like that. And eventually, students often come not being able to sing in tune. I don't really stress about it, because I'm asking them to listen to the CD every day, so their ear is getting trained. I am asking them to sing most lessons, because we sing things like finger number songs and things like that. So I don't stress about it 99% of the time. I find that eventually they sing in tune. I also don't criticize or say, oh, that note was terribly out of tune. Particularly in the beginning, I just sing and observe, oh, they're not in tune yet. Usually by the end of the year they are. So if we're waiting till a week before the exam, and I've had transfer students who come who can't sing in tune, that's stressful. And I often try and find if they can whistle in tune. If they're a transfer student, the exam's around the corner, can you whistle in? And sometimes they can whistle where they can't sing. Sometimes they need to find the note they're singing. So they sing a note, any note, and they sing their note, and then I find it. You're singing this note, you're singing B flat. And I match what they're singing and try and extend them. Okay, you're singing B flat, can you sing a little bit up from there, and so forth. So that's hard. It's hard when we've got a deadline. That's why I suggest starting singing right from the beginning. The Kodai method, and I can't speak with authority about Kodai. I know only what I needed to learn for uni. But Cyril Rousseau often shares things on the forum about Kodai, and his whole framework was singing. It was starting with intervals and singing, and particularly if they start young and they're hearing good examples, they pick it up without too much stress. But it is repetition, but that's what I did look it up. I was thinking, is there any particular tricks that vocal teachers have to get them in tune? And pretty much that's all I found when I was looking. But a vocal teacher might be able to give a much better answer than I am. Claire has said, oh, sorry, I should check. Does that answer your question sufficiently, or do you want to fire back at me with another question? Claire has said it reinforces the importance of building singing into lessons. Absolutely. The singing that's our instrument, isn't it? That's our own personal instrument. So yeah, and so much comes just from being able to sing. Singing choir, I was going to put that in the slides and didn't think about it, but singing in choir at school, and then when I started singing alto, suddenly that section of the exam where you have to sing the lower part was so easy because I was so used to singing in a group and hearing a part above me. Now, another question is how do you approach aural with adult beginner students? That's a really good question, because actually I'm a bit, can you not touch my phone, please? Later. So he wants to order dinner because it's 9 p.m. and he's getting hungry. I wondered why he was touching my phone. So with an adult beginner, just somebody's not muted. Oh, here we go. I'll mute you. Sorry, Viola, you're now muted, hun. Oh, I think she left while she muted. I didn't mean that. So with adult beginners, it is different because adults are so much more self-conscious. So I don't sit down and say, let's sing the finger number song together. Sometimes I sing it to them and say, this is what I do with the kids to help them remember their finger numbers. But no, I don't ask them to sing, but I do ask them to find things the same way I do with a child. You know, listen to the CD. Here is this interval. Can you find the next note? You know, here's the first note, G. David will probably tell me I'm not singing G, but I'll just pretend. And so can you find the next note? So I'm still asking them to do all things. I'm not specifically asking them to sing to me, but I do ask them to incorporate aural in what we're doing and finding chords and things like that. So that all still comes in, but you're right, adult beginners, there can be a lot of self-consciousness around singing. So it's not always something that's comfortable. If we're doing exams, sorry, you have no choice, you're just gonna have to do it. And then sometimes whistling. Sometimes people feel more confident to whistle, maybe because it's not their own personal voice. But yeah, that is a good question, and it is different, and it is more difficult. Now, Sapna, I have to run. Oh, thank you, Sapna. If you haven't already left, thank you so much for coming. Of course, Raphael, you are very welcome to ask a question. And is singing and listening to the CD also a way to build perfect pitch for a violinist? Absolutely, because you're hearing the CD every day. If you look on your phone, there are perfect pitch apps to teach perfect pitch, but what do? They repeat pitches, and they repeat them over and over again. And I think for me, when I started including the tape, now, Lewis, in case you don't know what a tape is, I think I have one I cooked up earlier. Look at this. This is, where's my camera? This is a tape. And earlier than that, records, but I don't have any. When I first started teaching, we were still buying secondhand books with records in the front cover of the Suzuki book. But, you know, I didn't know that my students were going to get perfect pitch when I first started saying, listen to the record. That happened as an accident. And it's only since reading research about it, I learned that it's because we're repeating those pitches. You get to know, your ear gets to know, this is the note this song starts on. And we went to play group one day when my eldest son was very, very, very little, like 2. And the lady started singing Twinkle, Twinkle, but she didn't sing very well. And she was singing it very low, like on some F sharp or something. And he looked at me like, she said she was singing Twinkle, Twinkle, but that's not Twinkle, Twinkle, you know, because their perfect pitch had already developed so strong. He knew that Twinkle, Twinkle starts on C. And of course, we know that there's transposition and things like that, but that was his 2-year-old listening to that. So absolutely, building perfect pitch will come the more you listen and the more you play. And as a violinist, there's so many benefits. Because if I'm practicing the violin and I'm putting my finger, let's say I'm putting my finger halfway between C and C sharp. I don't know that I'm doing that. I get used to that sound, you know. In other cultures, they don't use our equal temperament system. In Baroque music, they don't use our equal temperament system. So my ear gets used to this weird C that's not quite C, not quite C sharp. I call it no man's land when I'm teaching, but I've got used to it because I'm playing it. And I'm hearing this weird C more often than I'm hearing the right C. When I hear it on the CD, that person plays in tune. And if he was out of tune, they've put him through auto tune. So I'm hearing the note in tune. So my ear goes, oh, wait a second, that's not the C sharp. Wait, where's my hand? That's not C sharp. Let me move to where C sharp is. So absolutely. That repeated listening to the in-tune sound develops that sense of pitch. Now, I can't see Raphael's question yet, but feel free to type it in the chat, or if you wanted to ask it. Maybe you want to ask it in the yourself. Did you wanted to ask it here?
So, Sarah, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So as I said, I'm a student, and I started my. I just feel like I need to give you some intro so that I put things in context. So I started my doing piano a while back, and then eventually I got myself through level 1 for YouTube and buying books and so on. I got a teacher to do the level 2. Started level 3, and then COVID happened, and my studies had to stop. And obviously, being an adult with children and wives and jobs and responsibilities and so on, I'm finding very difficult to pretty much compromise everything. And I feel bad, as I don't want to drop it either, because I just love it so much. But so my question when it comes into oral learning, is there a method that you would recommend in terms of how should I incorporate in my daily routines anything, so I can give myself some sort of hope of improving? By the way, my teacher actually, when I used to do it, because she also had some health problems, so actually my lessons dropped at the moment. I'm not doing them anymore with the teacher. I'm trying myself hard enough to just keep myself at it. But I was told by my friends, by my teacher, that my oral is really good, that I have a very, very good musical ear, and I find myself whistling really well and singing into the pitch and all that. So I'm just I want to get to a point where I can actually recognize a note just by hearing, for example. I just want to know that was D, or that was E, or that was D.
So that's developing the skill of perfect pitch. And if you don't have time, that's one of the skills that gets compromised. So I never developed it. It's harder as an adult to develop that level of skill, but as in perfect pitch skill. But that doesn't mean you can't develop very good relative pitch. And that's when you hear one note and then you hear the next note and you know how far away from that note it is. As for how to do that when we're super busy, I'd say as much as possible, as part of your practice, try and figure out some song that you don't have the book for. I think that's the best starting place for developing that sense of the distances between notes. It doesn't have to be a very hard piece to start from.
So I guess you're talking about interval recognition?
Yeah. So just figuring out pieces as you're doing your practice can be beneficial. The books like the Aural Training and Practice have a CD. So I don't know if you drive to work, but for me, I used to put on the tape. Again, that's my example here, Lewis. I'd put on the tape while I was driving of oral exercises and just practice while I drove. And that can be a way of using that time. So there are, the Aural Training and Practice has it, the AMEB oral book, I can't remember what it's called, has it. I'm sure there are, Paul Harris's books have it as well. So they have CDs as well. So you could get Paul Harris at whichever grade level you feel you're at, or you can start at grade 1 just because makes a good foundation, and just put the CD on while you drive and try and answer the questions to yourself. Obviously.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks for that. I mean, for listening, I normally just buy the ABRSM apps on the iPhone, and there is apps where you can actually listen to the songs, the tunes that you're learning and all that. So.
Yeah, and I think they've got an oral practice app as well.
Yes, thanks for that. Thanks for the tips as well. Great session.
You're welcome. It's always hard as an adult, like even for myself, finding time for my own personal practice when I've got to help everyone else practice and juggle being part of a family it's hard. So I take my hat off to you. That's great.
Yeah, I must admit, I do get disheartened sometimes, because I look at children that learn so easily because their brain is like a sponge. And in 15 minute session every day or once a week, they learn more than what I can learn if I do a session every day. It's just so annoying, but it is what it is.
You know, I fully understand this problem. You know, I'll sit there and I'll be doing a uni assignment like, oh my goodness, I've got to transcribe this tune. Not anymore, I'm past that now, but I've got to transcribe this tune. And, you know, little Mr. 8 or 9 would come up and go, oh, it's easy, and just play it on the piano after hearing it once, you know. So I feel very jealous that my students get more skills than I do, because I regret not learning them. And I wish my teacher hadn't intentionally tried to not teach us perfect pitch and intentionally not let us listen to recordings. I wish I had the opportunities that my students have. So I do get jealous that they do it so easily.
Well, thank you very much. And sorry, guys, if I'm taking too much of your time, I guess more people want to ask questions.
It's all good. Thank you. Thanks, Raphael. Now, Claire has a question, and that's a really tricky question. She's asked, how do we avoid confusing students on pitch when they're learning a transposing instrument? And you know what? This is something I've really wrestled with. I always want my students to play C instruments. Hey, can you please buy a C clarinet? Can you please get a C trumpet? For exactly this reason. So I've talked to other teachers whose students get a B flat perfect pitch. So they get that transposed perfect pitch. If they're changing instruments all the time and doing a B flat clarinet here and an A flat clarinet there and a C clarinet there, they're not going to develop perfect pitch. Actually, it's going to not allow that and leave them with relative pitch. But of course, if they are changing clarinets all the time, that's a more important skill than perfect pitch, right? But I have met a lot of clarinet people with B flat perfect pitch rather than concert perfect pitch. So I think that I would aim at singing the pitch for their instrument they're playing. But it's that this one I think is a very hard question. I don't think that there's a straight answer to that. Definitely, if they're always going to be playing B flat clarinet, then maybe having perfect pitch on B flat clarinet and improvising, that will open improvising and all sorts of options for them. And then they just do the conversion in their head if they're answering it for any other purpose, like ABRSM oral tests. But yeah, I'm sorry, Claire, there's no easy answer to that. Transposing instruments is one of my pet hates. When they invented omnitonic instruments in the 1800s, they couldn't get rid of transposing instruments. But anyway, not everyone will agree with me, so I'll shut up on that one. Now, Susanna says, oh, Claire, do you want to come back at me? I can't actually see you on the screen, Claire. Did you want to come back at me, or you're happy with my answer, which was not my answer? Susanna says, I have a student who sings slightly off, not a semitone. So to keep her in pitch, we play a song she's familiar and then I stop at random and get her to sing the next note. And because it is a game, she gets, yeah, that's excellent. Susanna, that's excellent. I better read it again because she said a very good point. The student sings slightly off. So to help her with pitch, we sing a song she's familiar with and then stop at random, and then she has to sing the next note, like a musical chairs game. Because it's a game, then the pitch gets correct without too much stress. And Amy B has an exercise like that for, I think, preliminary grade or grade 1 oral, where they play the melody and you have to sing the tonic at the end of it. And so that's the same sort of idea, except I guess it's not a song they know well. But yeah, that's excellent. Pitch, when they haven't already got a strong sense of pitch, can be quite tricky, but I find no stress is best. If they think, oh, you're singing out of tune, oh, I can't sing in tune, I'm so hopeless. But if we don't talk about it, but just keep getting them to sing, it can self-correct. Thanks, Claire. Well, I should check the live stream, but I don't know where the live stream is to see if there's any questions in the live stream. So thanks. Lewis, maybe Lewis, can you just check for me in the live stream because I can't find where it went.
There's no
if there's any questions there. That's a bit hopeless that I don't know what I did with it. Oh my goodness.
No, just get that one super Zoom.
Yeah, thanks, RG.
You're still live.
No questions.
No questions. Okay, thank you so much. Well, I see some late comers. You've missed the all those you know, I gave out the winning lottery numbers 10 minutes ago, so I'm very sorry that you all missed that. But if there's any last minute comments about teaching oral, or any last minute questions about teaching oral, feel free to ask them before I close. I think you can unmute if you want to. It's all good, Maggie. No time suits everyone well. So I've just kept this time in my teaching day free for this purpose. No more questions? On that note then, I will say farewell. Yeah, lovely to see you, Casey. And thank you everyone for coming and joining me tonight. And the take home is teach oral every lesson, no matter, it's not about the exam, it's not about getting a good mark in the exam, it's about being a whole musician that has the availability of these oral skills so that they can be creative and so they can be musical and so they can understand what they're hearing. That's the take home. Everything else was extra fluff on top. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you, if you wish, again next week. All the best. Bye for now. Thanks for coming.